Hello everyone and welcome to our Inclusive Apprenticeships Employer webinar. I'm Vanessa Potter, Executive Director at the Sussex Council of Training Providers. Excited to be working in partnership with Coaster Capital EP and the Careers and Enterprise Company to bring you this Hello Inclusion webinar. I'm joined today by a fantastic panel of experts who will take us through some key questions through bite-sized presentations and Q&A. The webinar will be delivered in 3 parts. Firstly, we'll hear from our inclusion specialists, and we're delighted to welcome our speakers, Kate Omonigo-Pearson, Head of Social Justice at Genius Within, specialists in supporting inclusion within businesses, Claire Gardner, Managing Director of Dynamic Training, apprenticeship provider and inclusive apprenticeship champion. Thank you both and welcome. Part 2. We'll then hear from our inclusive apprenticeships employers who will share their experiences, and I'm delighted to introduce you to our panel. Aditi Dave, HR business partner with Mediquip, provider of community equipment services and solutions. Sophie Robbins, apprenticeship and supported employment coordinator at DBT Group UK, renowned courier service. And Andy Heerand, people director at the iconic hotel, the Grand Brighton. Thank you for joining us. Part 3 will finish with our Q&A with speakers, and we'll also be joined by a real-life apprentice. Please do use the Q&A feature throughout the webinar to pose any questions for our speakers, and we'll come to those at the end. So before we started, we just wanted to set off with a quick poll to give you a couple of seconds to answer. And my colleague Emma, who's supporting today, will launch that for you. Inclusive apprenticeships. So 3 questions for you there. We just want to ask you to have a think about inclusive apprenticeships within your organisation. Does your business offer inclusive apprenticeships? Excellent. Does your business offer apprenticeships? Do you know much about inclusive apprenticeships? Amazing. Excellent. Okay, really, really interesting. Really good. 80% looking to explore inclusive apprenticeships within their organisations. Fantastic. Nearly 80% currently, 75% currently deliver apprenticeships, and about half and half looking at current delivery of inclusive apprenticeships. Brilliant, thank you. That's a really good scene setting start for us. So we're going to begin with our first part of the webinar, and we're going to hear from some inclusive apprenticeship specialists really, who can share insight into what they do and the world of inclusion within the workplace. So I'm really delighted to introduce our first speaker. If we could move on to the next slide, please, Emma. Thank you. We are going to listen to Kate Omonigo, Pearson, who's going to talk about what is inclusion. Inclusion, what does it mean? Thank you very much. Over to you, Kate. Thank you.
Hello and thank you. So yes, my name is Kate Omonigo-Pearson. I am Head of Social Justice at Genius Within. So Genius Within are a community interest company that supports neurodivergent adults to enter and sustain employment. So neurodivergence covers conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia and Tourette syndrome. So inclusion. Well, firstly, systemic exclusion. That looks like this. So you've got a selection of animals on the right, and it says, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. So why make everyone go through the same system if they're good at different things? So careers operate like this cartoon. People with diverse skills, however, education and training are often not tailored for this. And in order to forge pathways to careers, we have to let go of needing everyone to be a generalist thinker. The world needs generalists and specialists, and the current working world is regularly set up to value only literacy, numeracy, and concentration skills. I can't do the control. Could I have the next slide, please? So around the world, there were key moments where governing bodies recognised the need to create laws and legislations that would aid inclusion. For example, the UK had the Disability Discrimination Act 1995, later replaced by the Equality Act 2010. In the USA, there is the American Disabilities Act 1990, and in Canada, the Canadian Human Rights Act 1985. Now, in 2006, there was the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This covered accommodations, adjustments, and universal design. In its most straightforward definition, universal design refers to the notion that by creating infrastructure with all abilities and diversity in mind, we can reduce the need for adaptation or accommodation at the individual level. Now, this is often referred to architectural environments for those with physical disabilities, like wheelchair access in buildings and assistive tech for neurominorities. However, infrastructure is more than building accessibility and tech. So everyday interactions among co-workers and with supervisors are influenced by the overarching HR policies and practices, which contain our beliefs and attitudes and create a social infrastructure that may help or hinder employees. So what does inclusion look like? So on the left, we have exclusion, no diversity, no inclusion, no attempts to do anything other than having teams of people that are just the same. Then we have compliance at the individual inclusion level. So to be compliant, a person is hired into a team, some adjustments and accommodations may be made for that individual, but there's still the mentality of the team and the individual. Then we have deliberate inclusion in teams. So due to regulation, they have to, for example, hire a set number of disabled employees, or they pledge to hire X number of autistic people, or those from minority ethnic groups. They form a team that can work well together though. But what we're really looking for is systemic inclusion. So this is inclusion for all. So where inclusivity is just the way things are done around here. Diversity and inclusion is simply embedded and teams are better off for it. Changes are made prior to any struggles, and the design of the workplace or job is inclusive for all, which ties back to that universal design I mentioned earlier. It's the norm. Next slide, please. So one bit of work that we have done, quite a large bit of work, is with Microsoft. And the adjustment we put in place was workplace strategy coaching. And we worked with groups of undergrads, interns, and apprentices over a 4-month period, delivering 6 sessions that were 2 hours each. So the topics in this coaching involved state management, so what the person needs to perform at their best, individual adjustments required, so assistive tech, noise cancelling headphones, one-to-one coaching. And also we explored communication. So we used our clean feedback model, which is an evidence-based feedback on what works well, what doesn't work well, and what would work better. Next slide, please. So the benefits to Microsoft of having that inclusive culture and that adjustment that we made were that employees were prepared to have conversations about what support and resources they need from the outset. Workplace culture became supportive of all differences. There was a bigger pool of skills and abilities in those groups, in those teams, that people could have creative ideas, greater problem solving, could communicate that within those groups. There was recognition of different strengths and how this benefits on an individual and organisational level, which saw results in increased productivity. And finally, increase in employee engagement rates. There was greater trust amongst all the workers, less absenteeism, increased performance and revenue, and reduced turnover. Next slide, please. So key takeaways, so things for you to walk away with, are that top candidates are attracted to companies with an inclusive workplace culture. So according to Glassdoor, 32% of employees and job candidates said they would not apply to a company where there was little diversity in the workforce. Engaged employees reduce costs and lead to better outcomes. So we all know that disengaged employees have lower productivity, higher absentee rates, and lower profitability. But what you might not know is that this translates to a cost of 34% of their annual salary. It's never too late to start to create a more inclusive workplace. And there is plenty of guidance and support available from different organisations to help make changes that are needed to become systemically inclusive. Next slide, please. So some useful adjustments that can be made, like right now, are looking at job specs, making sure they're unambiguous and detail exactly what's required. So not using terms like team player, because what does that actually mean? Offering adjustments from the point of hiring. So work trials instead of interviews can work really well. Or if you've got to do an interview, send the questions in advance. That's making it more inclusive for everybody. Training it in and encouraging a safe and inclusive workplace culture so that non-visible diversity is also shared and celebrated. raising awareness of diversity and inclusion in the company through training such as anti-racism, neurodiversity awareness, awareness about visual impairments, for example. And if you are a disability confident employer, not just adhering to that, but promoting this at all levels through the business or company. Thank you. Next slide, please. So what I want to leave you with is a quote from Dr. Nancy Doyle. So she is our Chief Research Officer, ex-CEO and founder of Genius Within. And she says, inclusion is a moral, social and economic imperative. We all lose when human potential is squandered. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kate. Amazing start. So inclusion is everywhere, and there are so many returns on investment and benefits to employers and individuals. But we're going to move next to hear about inclusive apprenticeships. What are inclusive apprenticeships? So Claire Gardner, Dynamic Training, apprenticeship champion organisation, will talk about what is an inclusive apprenticeship. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Vanessa. Just see if I've got control access. I have. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to briefly talk to you about apprenticeships and the flexibilities, considerations and reasonable adjustments that can be made to ensure apprenticeships are inclusive. So you may hear the terms supported apprenticeships, accessible apprenticeships or inclusive apprenticeships. They all mean the same thing at this present time. It's really the terms are used for explanation purposes only. All apprenticeships should be inclusive. For the purposes of this presentation, we are talking about providing apprenticeships to individuals with learning disabilities, learning difficulties and/or autism. So what is an apprenticeship? An apprenticeship is a paid job where the employee learns and gains valuable experiences alongside the on-the-job training. Apprentices spend at least 20% of their working hours completing classroom-based learning with a college, university, or training provider, which leads to a nationally recognised qualification. Employers that have pay bills over 3 million across sectors in the UK have access to the levy to fund apprenticeship training. All employers with an annual pay bill of less than 3 million share the cost towards apprenticeship training and pay 5%. The government pays the rest. So for example, if the apprenticeship cost 4,000, the government will pay 3,800 and the non-levy employer would pay 200. Employers receive an incentive payment of £1,000 for hiring an apprentice aged 16 to 18 or aged 19 to 24 with an education healthcare plan or has been in the care of the local authority. An education healthcare plan is a legal document that describes someone's special educational and health and social needs. This is just an example of the additional sort of human resource that can be put into place to help ensure an inclusive approach to an apprenticeship. In particular, the additions within this example are the learning support assistant and the job coach, which is usually via a supported employment service and can be accessed through Access to Work funding. So considerations for employers. Very much links into what Kate was just saying. So does the team supporting the apprentice require training to develop an understanding of the individual's needs and how best to support? The training provider can provide this, or even better, the individual themselves with support may be able to share how they like to be supported. Do you have an inclusive approach to your recruitment practice? So Kate gave some great examples, and it really does boil down to asking the individual applicants what do they require, and having a named individual in your workplace who will actually action those requirements. Thinking about maybe more time at interview, ensuring you are very clear on expectations. So an outline of what's going to happen in an interview can really help individuals. And like Kate said, the questions ahead of the interview is really helpful. Does the applicant need a representative during the interview process, or other communication requirements, just as examples. Undertake a risk assessment. Some individuals may come with particular vulnerabilities, so risk assessments help to minimise the risks associated and make any adjustments that are required. More and more individuals now are starting to have what's called vocational profiles, and they can really help you as employers to look at what the individual needs in the workplace. And of course, that's if consent is being given by the individual to share the vocational profile. Access to work funding, which supports individuals and you as the employer to make adjustments, for example, a job coach to support the apprentice to develop the required skills in the workplace. Within the apprenticeship funding rules, a person who has an educational healthcare plan can access flexibilities for functional skills in maths and English. So they can complete their apprenticeship achieving entry 3 in maths and English rather than the required level 1 or level 2 in maths and English. And just to say, reviews are absolutely paramount to a successful apprenticeship journey. So that meeting with the employer, the provider, the apprentice, and if applicable, the job coach, and really looking at continuous sort of like reasonable adjustments that need to be made, ensuring that inclusive approach. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire. So thank you to Claire and Kate. That concludes our first part. We've looked at what is an apprenticeship, what is an inclusive apprenticeship, and what is inclusion. So we're now going to move on to part B, where we'll hear from employers and hear about some real case studies. So I'm really, really pleased to invite our first employer, Sophie Robbins from DBT Group UK. Sophie is the Apprenticeship and Supported Employment Coordinator, and her core responsibility is to work with colleagues who join the company through the apprenticeship programme or their Inspire programme. So over to you, Sophie. I guess our first question for you is, I understand that you have a fantastic inclusion programme called Inspire. Could you tell us about it and talk to us about how you've made your workplace more inclusive? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Could you go to the next slide, please? Perfect. Yeah, so our Inspire programme is essentially an inclusion programme to offer opportunities to young people with disabilities or special educational needs to ensure that they not only get to experience work through a 2-week work placement and then, you know, that was a great experience for them, but to give them the opportunity to absolutely succeed and have a long-standing and successful career within a company that is considerate of their specific needs. So it was launched in 2018 after it was brought to our attention as a company that there are so many young people out there who are willing and able to work but just aren't being considered. So you can say that there was an untapped talent pool of people desperate for opportunities that us as employers were just completely overlooking. And so what we did is we set up the Inspire programme that gave them an avenue to access work that was suitable for them and their needs and provided them with all the support that they needed. So we do this by providing that work experience to broaden their horizons and open their eyes to the opportunities out there available to them. And then predominantly through our internship programme, where they'd get to have some on-the-job training, learning what it is that is needed to be successful at work. The outcome of those internships is paid employment, and a fantastic next step for many of our interns is inclusive apprenticeships. And that is partly how we approach inclusive apprenticeships. We have our students and our interns that join us, and as they progress through their course with us, we start looking at their next steps, and for some, the apprenticeship opportunities are the obvious next step to ensure that they are continuing their development. What we don't want to do is just that tick box activity of, okay, so these people have joined us, we've given them a job, that's it, we're done, we've done our bit. That's not enough anymore. It's not enough just to take people on and then say, yes, that's it. We need to give these young people the same opportunities that everyone else gets, and inclusive apprenticeships are absolutely a fantastic way to do that. So could we just go back one? Is that okay? Perfect, thank you. So what we do is we partner with providers that have absolutely the same vision and values as us, that with the right reasonable adjustments, these young people can achieve on an apprenticeship standard and can move on from their internships over to inclusive apprenticeships. The one thing that we have noticed since starting this journey with inclusive apprenticeships is that a lot of young people that go to specialist schools or colleges or other provisions aren't aware of this as an option for them, and under the belief that because they don't have level 2 in maths and English, or they may not be the most academic, that this isn't for them, which is absolutely not the case. In fact, for many young people with an EHCP plan that's already been mentioned, or with a statement of SEND, those entry requirements can be dropped if appropriate, so that it is more accessible to them. So what we do to approach this and ensure those learners are aware of their opportunities is we attend careers events where we promote these opportunities directly to them. And you can see in the picture on the screen myself and our IT director at an event that was at a special school solely for students with special educational needs or disabilities, to ensure that they know their options. And then our last approach to inclusive apprenticeships is to celebrate their success, and for our Inspire graduates to encourage them to aim high. A lot of these young people don't believe that they can do this because that's all that they've been told, when actually they very much can. And I've got a young man on screen now who is a perfect example of that. Callum, as you can see, who is holding up very proudly his award, started with us as an intern, progressed through our internship programme onto an inclusive apprenticeship, something that he had been told would be never an option for him. Well, actually, we completely disagreed and thought that this would, and with the right support, that he'd be really good at it. So we enrolled him, we supported him, and I'm really pleased to say that actually last year Callum was awarded, highly commended at the National Apprenticeship Awards, due to his work not only on his apprenticeship but what he contributed to the company and the fantastic work that he did. Not to mention that he got 92% in his final exam, which was the first exam that he'd ever sat in his life. So it just goes to show that when you approach inclusive apprenticeships and make these young people aware of what they can do, that it absolutely pays off, not just for them as individuals, but for the business as well. Next slide, please.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sophie. That's fantastic. And I guess our next question is around, you know, what's motivated you as an organisation to take this path and invest and create such amazing programmes?
So I think there's many business benefits, and you'll see those on the screen now that I will talk through. But the one thing that we did notice was that there was this issue out there within, you know, a wider issue of these young people who were getting to the age of 25 and weren't being given an opportunity, regardless of what they were actually capable of. They were just being told that they had to leave college, and they weren't being set up for a successful career. So the thing that really got us going on this was we recognised that we have the ability to change that, and we can support others to start make a change in that. But then if we talk about the return on investment and why it is that we really wanted to promote this within the business from a business point of view, there are loads of benefits from inclusive apprenticeships, very much similar to mainstream apprenticeships. They do go hand in hand. An inclusive apprenticeship is just offering someone a little bit of support based on their own needs. So with an inclusive apprenticeship, what we've noticed is that it doesn't just benefit the individual or the company as a whole, but actually the colleagues that the individual works with also find that it benefits their own development. We have people within our business that want to progress themselves, and working with an apprentice who requires some additional support is a fantastic way to develop their own skills and to embed a culture at DPD where everyone is included and that we are all welcome to flourish and should. And that brings me on to my next point. If it encourages a diverse workforce, we've really noticed since taking on our inclusive apprentices that they really do bring a fresh pair of eyes and a completely different way of looking at some tasks. The innovation and the ideas that they come up with that we would never think of or never notice is absolutely one of the most impressive things and the biggest return on investment, I'd say. The ideas that they come up with, and because their attention to detail, we've noticed, is so fantastic, they bring a completely different perspective to the teams that they sit within that's very valued by their colleagues and their managers. It also brings us the opportunity to celebrate externally and to get recognition for what these young people can achieve. Like I said, we've had Callum, who was highly commended at the National Apprenticeship Awards last year, and that external recognition, we're all from businesses here, we all know it's always nice to get an award, but what's even nicer is the confidence that it instills in those individuals when they've been told their entire educational history that this isn't possible for them. They really can achieve when given the chance to. And then my final point, and probably the most important point when thinking about return investment, is the quality of apprentices that we've got through our inclusive apprenticeship programme. They are absolutely fantastic employees. In fact, just this morning, and honestly, I'm not making this up, I had a manager turn around to me and say, they are the perfect employee. They are loyal. I ask them to do anything and they're willing, you know, no huffing and puffing. I don't want to do that today. They are so ready and raring to go and just want to do well, that they are the perfect employees. And so what you end up with is high quality employees who are good at their job, who are happy and developed, which is that not a workforce that we all want to promote within our own companies.
Amazing. Thank you, Sophie. Fantastic. What a great start to our employer section. Thank you. And we'll hear more from Sophie at the end for our Q&A section. So next, we'll hear from Andy from the Grand Brighton, the iconic hotel. Andy is the People Director and a champion of apprenticeships within her sector. Thank you for joining us. So our first question for you, Andy. Could you please talk to us about the approach the Grand takes in terms of inclusion and recruitment? Thank you.
Absolutely. Brilliant, Sophie. Just to say, I was sat there thinking, yep, I agree with that. Yep. I didn't need to say anything now because you've said it all. So thank you. I'll keep mine kind of very succinct. If you could put the next slide on for me, Emma. So it was really lovely to hear you kind of making the difference between inclusive apprenticeships and apprenticeships, because we don't name our apprenticeships inclusive apprenticeships because they're apprenticeships that everybody is able to take kind of regardless. So, but I have put the inclusive apprenticeship kind of title on here. So our culture generally at the hotel sits around kind of three values of individual, inclusive and progressive. And we absolutely believe that people are at the heart of our success, and we want to have a culture where everybody is proud to work with us, no matter who they are and their background. So right from recruitment, whatever that looks like, we're looking for people who know that everyone in our business has different roles, they have different responsibilities, they have different personalities, and they have different experiences and backgrounds, which means that as a team we're stronger, and that together we can do exceptional things, which is our kind of mission at the hotel, is to deliver that exceptional hospitality and service for our guests. So one of the ways that we've gone about making sure that we're a truly inclusive workforce is to really spend a lot of time focusing on inspiring talent from for people in different backgrounds. So working in the local community, making sure that people understand that hospitality and careers within hospitality isn't out of reach, even for people that perceive that they might be. And I think if I look at the time that I spend in my role as people director, I spend a lot of time kind of focusing on just that. So similar to kind of Sophie, for us, it's about developing partnerships, and that could be with specific charities who support young adults with special educational needs. It could be working with colleges like Oak Grove and Woodlands Mead in Burgess Hill, who focus and support young adults with special educational needs, but also working in schools, mainstream schools, and with local education support providers. And I've got one of my apprentices on this webinar today that came from that kind of partnership with Downland School where he was at. And then, as Sophie again kind of talked about, for us it's about making sure that everyone has an experience opportunity in our industry. So that could be through practical work experience, it could be through a case study, and we've launched some really successful for both mainstream and special educational needs schools case studies where people come in and they get to experience actually being a room attendant, actually cooking in the kitchen, setting up events tables, making cocktails, and really kind of showcasing hands-on learning, which is what the majority of our apprenticeships kind of focus on. When people join us, whether that's on work experience, whether that's in their internship, it's around looking at people's skills, their strengths and their work styles, and making sure that that setting and that work area is right for the individual, so that we can make sure that they've got the opportunity to thrive. And that could be just examples in the kitchen where we've got people who have kind of noise sensitivity, so they don't like working in a busy environment, so we make sure that they've got a separate area. It could be working with people with dyslexia and making sure that we're giving them verbal instructions rather than written instructions when we're giving the tasks for them to do. So just really embracing those kind of differences and the styles of work that people will thrive in. And then we also want to make sure that we're contributing to people's ability to get paid employment. And lots of our successes are directly into paid employment without an apprenticeship, but that's more of a choice rather than because we don't offer that. And for us, an apprenticeship is the perfect pathway for people who like learning in a practical way, people that are ready to immerse themselves into the world of work, whereas they haven't been able to do that in education. So really just making sure, right from kind of our general culture in the hotel right through to each of those stages that the colleagues that I've heard already so far have highlighted, making sure that at each of those stages we're embracing those differences that people have in our team. Try and put the next slide on for me. Oh. So we've been, we've worked in this way for a number of years now, and it's very difficult to write down the benefits and kind of successes that this approach to inclusivity and to generally to our apprenticeship has offered. Sophie used the word untapped talent, and I kind of really resonate with that. So in our industry, there's so many different jobs and different roles and so many different elements and components to each of those jobs that identifying people's skills and those real kind of opportunities that they have allows us to bring in that untapped talent into maybe part of a job, a specific part of a job, or a full job depending on capabilities. And it's really allowed us to kind of challenge the way that we've always done things to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be part of a specific experience. One of the kind of byproducts of that is that as a leader, you never stop learning. And Michael, that's going to speak to you later, worked for an executive chef that's been an executive chef for years and years and years, and has had kind of very limited exposure to working with people with additional needs, and just watching him work with some of our young talent that's come through the kitchen has really enhanced his skills as a leader, where he's really learned a lot about himself and the way that he manages and kind of guides his team. He was previously very kind of set in his approach to developing young talent, and this has really kind of taught him how to kind of embrace differences and to challenge himself in terms of managing and guiding and leading each of those young adults in a way. And we've seen that across our business in different areas outside of the kitchen. I mentioned before about kind of embracing that untapped talent has allowed us to kind of challenge the way that we do things. And we've seen lots of efficiencies within the teams where we've challenged and changed the way that we work, and also a lot of engagement and retention in those teams. And again, I refer back to the kitchen, but we have a young gentleman who works in there who only makes one part of our afternoon tea, but it's the part that he absolutely thrives on. He loves making it, doing the same thing over and over again each day. Whereas for another chef that likes to be creative and likes to experiment, you know, him doing that job has taken away that kind of routineness that one of our chefs was bored with, and allowed them to focus on different elements of service, which then creates a more kind of engaged and hungry workforce. So we've really seen the kind of benefits in us challenging the way we do things. I put a few kind of like hard statistics on there as well, because you know what you've heard so far from me and from Sophie is kind of words. So from the kind of work that we've done, we've recruited into our team, which is only a reasonably small team in our property. So we have 4 young adults that have come through our Team Dominica work, which is a charity that supports young adults with learning difficulties. We've got 2, and they've all come through supported internships. We've got 2 further supported internships that are certainly going to lead to apprenticeships or employment at the end. And they are young adults with selective mutism, autism, dyslexia, and yes, those 3 areas. We've also provided a work experience programme for over 40 other SEN learners and further 6 supported internships where we've enabled people to secure roles outside of our industry. And we're really proud that we're kind of contributing to making sure that everybody has you know, an opportunity to find work that's fulfilling for them. And then just something that is, again, not as tangible, but working with such a diverse workforce with lots of really delightful and ambitious young talent is such a rewarding and invaluable adventure. And for us, we're wholeheartedly invested in making sure that everybody has a meaningful workplace encounter and an opportunity.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. We are going to hear from you as well at the Q&A in a moment, and also hear from your amazing apprentice, Michael, who I can see on the screen now. But thank you and welcome. We'll have a chat with you in a few moments. We're going to hear from our 3rd employer next, Aditi Dave from Mediquip. Welcome. Aditi is the apologies. Aditi is the HR business partner for the Southeast region at Mediquip, and you recently had the opportunity to be part of Mediquip's journey in supporting the employment journey for individuals with a disability. So thank you for joining us, and you're going to take us through an overview of your approach at Mediquip. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Vanessa, and hello, everyone. Just a brief introduction about Mediquip. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Mediquip is a company that provides community equipment services and solutions that help enable people to live independently and safely in their own homes. We were awarded the first community equipment services contract in 1993, and we are proud to say that we've been able to retain that to this day. We have 28 depots across England and Wales, employing over 1,000 colleagues and support over 14 million people to live independently. And the next slide, please. Thank you. So with regards to our approach to inclusive apprenticeships, as we're aware, inclusive apprenticeships are a flexible program designed for those with a recognized learning difficulty or disability, wherein the members of staff are able to earn whilst they complete their qualification. In 2021, Mediquip committed to increase employment opportunities for people living with a disability. And therefore, within that, in terms of our approach, what we had done was partnered with supported employment agencies, and that hasn't been a project for us, but has been a journey for us. And as Kate mentioned, as part of her presentation previously, it's a journey wherein we're trying for that to become the norm within the organization. We were very fortunate to have been introduced to BASE, the British Association for Supported Employment, followed by introductions and working together with Dynamic Training, Forward to Employment, REAL, and many more supported employment agencies. Our approach to inclusive apprenticeships is mainly identifying and removing barriers to entry and progression for the individuals. And this approach has purely been guided by our involvement in the Disability Confidence Scheme. We are currently at level 2, the employer status, and we are very actively and passionately working towards level 3, the leader status. The main point to this approach is that it's not a tick box exercise for us, but it has been a journey to make a difference in order to be able to give the individuals the confidence in not just their personal, but as well as their professional development and life where possible. How we've made our workplace practices more inclusive. You may have all come across the information in the next 2 slides. You probably have come across this framework as part of the Disability Confidence Scheme. And what we did was made a few additions or changes. They were baby steps for us. It was a massive learning curve, a learning process, but it's worked out really well for us in these 4 different parts. We made additions or changes to our recruitment process by making changes to the job adverts for them being more inclusive, communicating these vacancies to various supported employment agencies actively, consciously ensuring that we'd offer interviews to disabled individuals, and providing reasonable adjustments where required. In terms of providing pathways to employment, and genuinely hand on heart, prior to meeting with BASE as well, or Dynamic Training, etc., the only method or route that we were aware of were the mainstream apprenticeships or paid employment. But following that, what we then came across and were able to offer were supported apprenticeships and supported internships. We're also open to supported traineeships, work placements, etc. But so far, apprenticeships and internships are ones that we've been able to successfully offer. The next slide, please. What we've also then done to make the workplace more inclusive is making sure that we're retaining the existing employees. So we have regular support meetings with them, which are recorded in our what's called IRIS, which is our HR and payroll system, on the profiles of the employees. Members of staff are also able to view the record that we have for them. We're able to run reports with regards to where we are at, analyze the data, and what we need to do next. We ensure that there are no barriers to development for the individuals. We have annual performance development plans for them. Managers are fully aware of how to support members of staff, occupational health interventions, support meetings, access to work, and valuing and listening to feedback from the individuals. And one very quick, brief example would be, for instance, one of our members of staff who had a hearing difficulty mentioned to us that when we go through training, which is done online or on the computer, when they're going through different videos, is it possible for us to have subtitles? And it was such a minor request, and all we had to do was inform our training check team, and it was a click of a button away, and they did. And believe me when I say this, when it was then rolled out to the rest of the regions, we received such positive feedback from the individuals to say that this has been so helpful to them. So it's these little things, but that make a massive difference to individuals who really do, for whom it makes a difference. And lastly, developing employees, wherein we introduced a working interview process, again, where Kate had mentioned, like a working trial process with a buddy system, so that they have the right induction and onboarding, as well as ongoing work experience at work. We also had the disability awareness training for managers, and are also now including that in the online induction for all employees. So these are some of the ways we've tried to make our workplace more inclusive.
Fantastic. And what's been the return on investment for you?
Yes, so why inclusive apprenticeships and the benefits of it? Increasing workplace diversity is more important today than ever before. Within our experience as part of this journey, as mentioned before, it hasn't genuinely been a tick box exercise, but as part of our journey, what we've realized is that we do have higher productivity from the MEMSA staff who have come through these different various programs. It has helped reduce training costs because they go through extensive training and guidance for the entire year or for the entire period of time. And therefore, it reduces any other recruitment costs. There's lower turnover, which is a fact wherein MEMSA staff have so far through the program continued to remain with us on permanent full-time employment, which was 2 so far. We currently have 3 other individuals on through this program who will also be offered full-time roles on completion of the full program. It also helps foster a wider talent pool and therefore attracts new employees. We have lower absenteeism rates, and again, hand on heart, we have had these MEMSA staff who have been absent through COVID recently, 2 of them actually as of today. However, other than that, we haven't really seen absenteeism from them. The dedication, the level of motivation is just different. It's absolutely amazing. And also, as Sophie previously mentioned, the innovation, the different thought process, the ideas that they come up with are really game-changing at times, specifically in the warehouse, etc. And lastly, the most important benefit, I guess, for us is being part of the individual's journey to achieve their goals, their growth, their confidence, and future development, and hopefully future employment, just to see that smile, that confidence on their face when they now leave the workplace. When managers say, Aditi, when they were leaving, they had such a massive wave to say goodbye. And some conversations such as these can actually be quite emotional in a very positive way. So yeah, these are some of the most important and positive benefits for us so far.
Thank you so much, Aditi, in sharing that story with us, and overwhelming benefits there, and really great journey. That concludes our second part of the webinar. So we've heard what are apprenticeships, what are inclusive apprenticeships, and what does inclusion mean. We've heard some employer case studies about how different organisations apply principles and approaches to support inclusion within their organisations. We've got time for some questions now. So we'll have a few minutes for Q&A. There's a Q&A feature in the webinar, so please do feel free to enter any questions you have in the Q&A bar. If we don't get to answer all the questions today, we'll come back to you individually and share some responses. But I'd like to start by welcoming Michael Rose, who's here from the Grand Brighton. Welcome, and it's brilliant to see you today. Thank you for joining us. So I'd just like to ask you a first question, if that's okay. So you've completed your apprenticeship, level 2 commis chef. Excellent, excellent. Can you just tell us what's the best thing about doing an apprenticeship? What did you gain from it?
I feel doing the apprenticeship, especially at the Grand Hotel, it was such a good experience for me, because you're working with all of these chefs. When you go into the apprenticeship, you're very scared, you're very nervous, but the people you're working with really help what you become as a chef later on in your career, because everyone was so supportive, so nice to me. And a lot of the time I'd get stuck on one of my questions on my apprenticeship, and I'd go to them and we'd all sit around and they would help me, they would go through it with me. And it was so nice that everyone was so supportive to me. So yeah, I think the apprenticeship is great for me because I loved cooking and it was my passion, but I wasn't completely sure that I wanted to do it as a job. But after the apprenticeship, I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
Brilliant, brilliant. And what's been your proudest moment in your role?
My proudest moment was probably getting a distinction in my test, because through my GCSEs, I did not do very well because I struggle with dyslexia, but I found cooking, I understand, I know, and getting a distinction was just so good for me. And yeah.
Brilliant, that's amazing.
Can I just jump in there and say that
absolutely.
Michael actually won last year in the Brighton and Hove Apprenticeship Awards. He actually won the award for Above and Beyond. So that's one of our proudest moments for Michael as well.
Congratulations. Well done, Michael. It's amazing. And in terms of your inclusive apprenticeship and your apprenticeship, how do you think it's helped you progress in your career and in your journey?
As I said before, I feel like knowing what I want to do for my future is so key for me, because I thought if I don't enjoy the chefing, then I'm not sure what I'll do, because I'm a very practical person. And also working, I got a job in the Cyan kitchen at the Grand, and it's amazing there because I get to do specials, I get to do my special desserts, my special starters, and I have a responsibility in the kitchen to keep everything tidy and organized. And I really enjoy that part of my job. So yeah. Excellent.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for joining us today. So I'd just like to ask a question of we'll go to Kate, if that's all right. So we've learned about apprenticeships and inclusion. Is there support available to employers that you're aware of? Your role at Genius Within is supporting employers, and where can they go to for support? I understand we have Access to Work, Disability Confident. Could you talk to us about that a little, please?
So first off, the Disability Confidence Scheme is a free government scheme, which just really helps to encourage employers to think differently about disability and take action to improve how they recruit, how they retain staff, how they develop them, and really what's best for disabled people that they're employing. And then we've got Access to Work, which is another scheme, which is for those with physical or mental health conditions or disabilities. And it's basically giving you access to a grant to help pay for any practical support in the workplace, any adjustments that need to be made, whether that's building adjustments, whether that's assistive tech, like the noise cancelling headphones or dual screen standing desks, those kinds of things. But also they're a good source of advice for managing conditions or disabilities. And they can give access to strategy coaching, which is provided by lots of different organisations. So for Genius Within, we provide strategy coaching for those that are neurodivergent. And there's other organisations that provide kind of similar coaching or advice that can help support with any kind of physical or mental health condition. So those things are available through government websites. You just do a Google search and they're quite easy to see. And yeah, they just really help to support people or organisations really in being really inclusive of everybody. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And we'll be circulating information after the webinar, and we'll include links to those support organisations. Thank you very much. We have a question in the Q&A feature, and I think I'll ask Claire if that's okay. So we have an organisation saying, we work closely with many students with SEND, SEMH in Sussex, Surrey and Kent. What's the easiest way to find employers who can provide inclusive apprenticeships?
That's for me, is it? Sorry.
Sorry, Claire, yes, please.
Was that me?
Thank you, yeah, sorry.
So sorry. So I've got more questions than an answer. Is that individual, is that an apprenticeship provider already?
I think it's an organisation that works with young people, and they're looking to find opportunities for their apprentices, for their young people to become apprentices.
Okay, so gosh, where do I start? They could look at apprenticeship providers within their locality, because they are often linked into employers already, so may have vacancies available where the potential apprentices can apply. From an employer perspective, if they've got links already with their employers, they could actually do some of the promotional work about talking to employers about inclusivity and start that conversation and start building those networks. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in.
I think Sophie, you had your hand up. Please contribute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I did put it up for the point before, but I do have a point for this one as well. So I'll stick on this point to not jump us around too much. I think from an employer point of view, if people were looking for inclusive apprenticeship opportunities and were wanting, had an individual who had a certain skill set that would align to one of our apprenticeships, then there is nothing stopping an individual from applying for a general apprenticeship position. I don't think there are many vacancies that say inclusive apprenticeships. I think someone said it before, it might have even been you, Claire. They're not a specific thing, it's just to help explain and give the individual confidence that there'll be help available should they need it. So for us, I hosted an employer engagement session, and a young man at the end of the session said, I'm really interested in a customer service role, what would I need to do? And my answer was, apply in the same way anyone else would, or if you need reasonable adjustments made, just point out to me what those may be and we'll put those in place for you. And that young man, he advised on what he would need to happen in order to have that recruitment process made accessible to him, and then he went through it just as anyone else would. He is now he was successful, is now one of our top performing apprentices in our customer service team, and has all of the adjustments made alongside the rest of his cohort who don't need those adjustments. But it's not, anything like a individualized, like he sticks out like a sore thumb. It's nothing like that. He's with the rest of his cohort. There are just some additional things we do. So when finding these opportunities for your young people, go to those that are already offering apprenticeships. There's no reason why they shouldn't be making them inclusive, and it is their absolute duty to ensure that they are doing that. If you do oh, sorry.
I'm going to say I agree, because when you've heard from Michael earlier, when I met Michael at the careers fair, we weren't talking about an inclusive apprenticeship. We were talking about his passion and his desire to want to be a chef. And then it was later down the kind of conversations where Michael talked about his dyslexia, and we then arranged the additional support and the extra time and things for him, so that his apprenticeship became inclusive, but it wasn't set out and labelled as an inclusive apprenticeship. Whereas I've got somebody else that we've just signed up, starts next week in the kitchen, who has come through a charity who support young adults with autism. And right from the start, we've been talking about an inclusive apprenticeship. And you're right, Sophie, employers have that responsibility to make any apprenticeship inclusive.
Thank you so much. And that's a really, really good point to end on, really. Every apprenticeship could be an inclusive apprenticeship. And going back to Kate's presentation earlier, inclusion can be embedded throughout the recruitment process and throughout the organisation. So why shouldn't every apprenticeship be an inclusive apprenticeship? And I guess that's one of our objectives today, to support employers to start that journey. So thank you very much to our panel for answering those questions. Really, really fantastic to hear from you and to hear your presentations. Thank you very much to colleagues at SCTP, Careers Enterprise Company, and the Coastal Capital Rep for supporting today's webinar. The aim of today's session was to celebrate inclusion within apprenticeships through bite-sized updates and sharing real case studies and takeaways. So I really, really hope that they'll help you start or continue on your journey towards inclusive apprenticeships. just wanted to finish with a quick poll. My colleague Emma will launch that for you now, just to understand your feelings towards inclusive apprenticeships. We can send you further information about next steps, support, information and guidance. We'll do that shortly. There are also funding opportunities through apprenticeship levy across the South East we can share with you, and guidance and support. So just give you a quick second to complete that. Excellent, lovely, excellent, fantastic, fantastic. That's brilliant, excellent. Results are still coming in. Excellent, lovely. So we'll just end the poll there. So fantastic to see 75%. I'll share the results for you there. 75% looking to take forward inclusive apprenticeships within an organisation. And that is incredible. We will be in touch with further information to help you on that journey. So without further ado, I just want to finish by saying that we'll send out the follow-up pack with information, further information on guidance and supports. There's also a new guide being developed by CGP in partnership with the South East Apprenticeship Ambassador Network, so we'll share that with you. A massive thank you to our panel for joining us today and for everyone watching live. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.